see a lot of different opinions on this. I don't think this is going to play out the way many people think it is. So I'm going to share my thoughts on it.
So, President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
All right, let's dig into some big news that's come out over the last couple of days. That's the executive order that the Trump administration signed, giving the United States most favored nation status on prescription drugs. We've talked about this at length in episodes prior, where the United States, we pay more for medications than other parts of the world, and this executive order is designed to fix that. The most notable example that Trump gave was for Ozempic. He has a buddy, billionaire buddy, who takes a medication. He bought it for $88 in the United Kingdom. That same drug's over $1,000 here in the United States. How is that fair? Why does our country allow that? The drugs that we buy, that your employer-sponsored plan is buying for your members are buying through your plan. In many cases, we're paying 10 to 20 times more here in the United States than other parts of the world, and that's not fair. So I want to break this down. What does this executive order mean? How is it going to impact your employer plan, your employees, and how's this going to affect our society? I'm going to share my thoughts, predictions, what this means for you as an employer, and ultimately where I think where this is going to head for our country. And it's not going to be what many people think it is. And most importantly, what you should be doing as an employer, trying to reduce the cost of your health insurance for your plan and for your members. So I'm going to share some thoughts. Some of them are going to be pretty unpopular with folks in the industry, and maybe even unpopular with the general population. But I do want to preface my thoughts before I say them. I've been an outspoken critic of the current system. I think healthcare and insurance is rife with conflicts of interest. It's rigged against us, and change has to happen, and change is going to happen. That's one of the things I'm most excited about with this Trump administration, is his focus on not only being healthy, but his focus, it's a continued effort of fixing what's broken in healthcare that causes us to pay more. So the first thing that I'm going to mention here about this most favored nation status is it's an attempt to set price controls. And if you just look through history, let's just be honest here, price controls don't work. I'm going to give you some examples of price controls that we have here in the United States that don't work, that cause you and me to pay more than we should for healthcare. And I don't think that this executive order is intended, I mean, there's a 30-day window on it for it to go into effect. Let's be honest, that's not going to happen in 30 days. But price controls don't work. I don't think it's the government's job to establish the value of a good or service, and it's not the government's job to set a price. So I'll start off with an example. If a doctor wants to make $100 for a visit when they see a patient, and the government comes in and says, no, doctor, you're not allowed to charge more than $50 for that visit. We're going to cut your reimbursement in half. You're seeing this happen now with Medicare and Medicaid. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But if a doctor can't make enough money to cover their cost of providing that service, they're just not going to provide it. If the doctor's cost is $90 and they make a $10 profit, I'm not saying that's what it is, but using an example, and you're going to pay them $50 for that visit, they're going to lose money to do it. They're not going to continue performing that service. And so let's talk about what goes into the cost for drug makers today. So yes, and I'm not saying this is fair and I'm not saying this is right, but let's just be open about what's involved here. It's the cost of research and development for these drugs. It's the cost to go through regulatory channels with the FDA and the long and drawn out process that's there. It's the cost to research and develop other drugs that never come to market, and they've got to bear that cost and pass that on to the market. Them passing it on all in the United States, is that fair? No, it's not, and that needs to change. There are a number of other factors that go into the cost of medications in the United States, more so than just the cost of the medications passed on by Big Pharma. One other thing I would add on to costs of, that are borne by big pharma, the drug makers, is these blockbuster lawsuits that have happened. So when you think about price and profitability on a unit level, if you make a widget, right, the cost of this widget isn't just the material that's in here. It was the cost to research and develop it. It's the cost to ship it. It's the cost to market it. It's all these other costs associated with it. But what you don't see is the cost that was of these other goods that I've created that just never came to market. Or maybe I built this mouse and it exploded and I get sued, and so I pay out $10 billion to rectify that issue. Well, that cost is borne. I have to pass that on in the future goods that I sell to make up for that cost. I'm not shilling for big pharma here, but I do want to talk through what are the ways that we can fix the problem that we've got. And so I'm going to lay out two specific things that I think need to happen. The first is going to be PBM reform. And what I mean by PBM reform, there's really three things that need to happen. And I think these are the steps that the government's going to take. Actually, let me back up a second. This executive order, do I think this is ultimately what Trump thinks is going to happen? I don't think so. Trump's a businessman. He understands price controls don't work and it doesn't create sustainability in the market. What we want is companies to continue to produce products that benefit society, benefit our employees, benefit the population, right? And you've got to give incentives and disincentives. That's how economics works. If there's an opportunity for a company to come in and create a good or a service and they can make a profit doing it, companies will invest and build a business to fill that void or fill that need. Drug makers are really important in our society because guess what? They make drugs that heal people and cure diseases and all the things, right? That's important for our society. Not just drugs that are on the market today, but what are the drugs that are going to come on the market over the next 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now? We want that continued investment and we want that innovation to continue to happen. And not allowing drug makers to have a upside in profitability is going to stifle that. We don't want that. So how do we do this in a way that's fair and is sustainable? One of the big drivers of increased costs here in the United States, there's several things, is the way the current pharmacy benefit managers operate in our country. The three big ones are owned by insurance companies, is the insurance carriers. It's a profit center for them today, and there's a lot of middlemen involved, and that needs to be addressed. So when I talk about PBM reform, I'm talking about let's get rid of rebates. There's a lot of discussion about rebates, but they artificially inflate the sticker price of a drug, and somebody's getting a kickback. And that money not all of it comes back to employer-sponsored plans. A lot of that is captured by middlemen. There's group GPOs, I've talked about this in prior episodes, that the rebates are paid to. There's middlemen that take a cut of that. And then maybe the employer, if you're self-insured, gets some of that money back, but it's never all. Why not just provide the lowest net price of the drug at the point of sale? It's clear, it's transparent. That needs to happen. We need to get rid of rebates. The second thing is we need to disallow the ownership of a pharmacy benefit manager by an insurance company. So I've talked about vertical integration. An insurance company is going to require you to use their pharmacy benefit manager that's tied to their insurance, and they set the price. There's a conflict of interest there because they're allowed to make money filling those drugs through an employer-sponsored plan through spread pricing and rebates, and that needs to be discontinued. Insurance companies need to be focused on managing the cost of the medications, not profiting from them. And so by disallowing ownership, and this has happened throughout the course of history, we with the Rockefellers, we did it with U.S. Steel, we've done it with the Bell Communication System. The government needs to regulate this in a stance where there can't be conflicts of interest. We've got to break up this because it's creating monopolies and oligopolies here where too few people control too much of the pie. And it's stifling competition in the marketplace. So the second piece of this is disallowing ownership of PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, by insurance company. The third thing is we've got to disallow any sort of rebates or backdoor payments from a PBM to any insurance company or any party. It's that backdoor flow of money that creates the conflict of interest. In fact, it's illegal for me as an insurance advisor or a broker to pay somebody through the back door. So if I was to give a client a return of any of my compensation or a return of any sort of premium, that's called a rebate, and that is prohibitively banned. It's an illegal activity for me to do that, but we allow insurance companies to pass money through the back door to each other. That has to stop. And when you do those three things, when we get rid of rebates on medications and disallow spread pricing, when you disallow ownership of a PBM by an insurance company, and you close the back door where there's no backdoor payments allowed to or from anybody, you now create this environment where insurance companies are focused on how do we get the best price for our members, not how do we profit from this. And so I think those are three really important things that have to happen. And the second thing is going to be opening up global sourcing. So that's really what we're talking about here with this executive order, is just make the price of the drug here in the United States the same price as it is in India or the United Kingdom or in Canada. Yeah, that sounds great in theory, but there's going to have to be a rebalancing because these pharmaceutical drug makers, they're going to have to adjust their prices globally. And being able to source, if I can get a drug in Canada for a tenth of the price of what I get it for in the United States, that should be legal. We should be able to do that because guess what? A lot of these drugs are not even manufactured in the United States. They're manufactured in other parts of the world and shipped into the United States. It's the exact same drug. Why can't I go get it legally and import it from some other part of the world at a much lower price? It does exist today. We do this for many of our clients, but there are a lot of hurdles that you have to go through to accomplish that. There's legalities to it. There's middlemen that are involved. And by opening this up and legalizing it in a much more structured way, you're going to allow third parties, there's going to be businesses that are going to be created which already exist, and they can expand that offering to any drug, not just a limited number of drugs. And so it's the same way that you've seen Uber come in and disrupt the taxi industry. It wasn't the taxi industry that decided to create Uber. It was an outside disruptor that came in, and it changed the taxi service. I mean, pretty much it's gone. You go to an airport, there's not taxis, there's Ubers. It's the same thing that streaming did to the movie industry. It's the same thing that digital photography did to legacy photography. That's the sort of transformation that we need to see in our industry. And by opening up importation of drugs is going to help expedite that. And it's going to it's going to create competition inside of our own borders for pricing of medications. And it's also going to allow the drug makers to level the playing field with pricing in these other countries. That's going to be something that's going to have to happen because telling drug makers you're just no longer going to be able to make a profit globally, is that really going to work? I don't think so. But just to give you some thoughts behind where I think Trump is going with this, I don't think he is expecting prices of medications in 30 days to be matched with India or Mexico or Canada. He's a businessman first and foremost. And you've seen him take this similar tack with China recently, with the trade wars and the tariffs. He is positioning himself for transformation in the industry, which I think is a very good thing. So you start in a negotiation, you ask for more than you think you're going to be able to get. He's put drug makers and the health care industry, particularly the insurance companies and PBMs, on notice. Change is coming, and you better get in line with what's about to happen or else. And I think that's a good thing. He's come out very strong with a very strong position by saying we're just going to price everything according to whatever you charge in other countries, which I don't think is the ultimate goal. I think reform and transformation is the ultimate goal. So we start off in this position, and it now opens this place for, I don't want to say negotiation, but I think to enact legislation and regulatory change with what I just described. We're going to break up ownership of PBMs. In fact, I think today there was an article that I saw just before I sat down in front of the camera. There are congressmen that are proposing a bill to disallow ownership of PBMs by insurance companies. Now, is that going to go somewhere? I think it's going to have some teeth. I think that's one of the things that I actually predicted several months ago in a prior episode, that this is one of the things that I think is going to happen. But let's get to an example of price controls not working in the United States, and specifically in healthcare. The government's taken this stance with Medicare and Medicaid. Hospital facilities and physicians cannot negotiate with Medicare or Medicaid on their reimbursement rates. It's whatever the government's going to dictate the price to be. And I think that has created second and third order effects that we all pay for in a hidden tax. And I'll give you an example and the impact. Medicare sets pricing schedules based on your region and the complexity and the severity of care. There's no negotiation with the government on their reimbursements. So what does this mean? Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements are flat. They're going up 1% to 3%, and in some cases they're actually being cut. At the same time, the cost for providers and facilities are going up anywhere between 8 and 10% a year. What does that mean? The margin's compressing, or they're losing money accepting government payments. Since I can't negotiate with the government, who can I negotiate with? It's your plan, and they're doing that with the insurance companies. You see this happen all around the country. It most recently happened in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is where I live. One of the big hospital facilities was dropping out of a network because they wanted a really high increase in their reimbursement rate from the insurance company. Why? Because they're not being reimbursed adequately by Medicare or Medicaid, and they've got to be able to make up that shortfall from somebody, and it's going to be you and me and your employees by way of an increased cost back to the insurance company. It's a hidden tax, and it's why when you look at data, commercial plans, which is where the majority of Americans are insured, is through an employer. Commercial insurance and PPO rates, so your United, your Cigna, your Aetna, your Blue Cross, we're paying about 2.5 to 3.5 times more than Medicare. And that's to make up for the shortfall of these price-controlled rates that Medicare and Medicaid pay to those facilities. And you're seeing the impact of this happen, particularly in rural and community facilities. Many of them are at risk of shutting their doors, and many of them are. You're seeing this in the news now, where you're seeing these rural hospitals, they're just shutting the doors because they can't continue to operate. Why? Because the majority of their patients are Medicare and Medicaid payers. They're paid by the government, and the government does not pay enough. In metro areas, the mix might be 50% government paid and 50% or 60% government paid and 40 to 50% commercial. They're making their profit and covering that shortfall in those price-controlled government markets off of us. And so that's a drag. It's a hidden tax that all of us are paying. That's why healthcare, through your commercial plan, through your employer plan, and your employees, we're paying more than we should because the government and the price-controlled market's not paying enough. So where's this headed? I think it's headed in the right direction. Major change is coming. I think you're going to see a change in the way pharmacy benefit managers are owned. I think you're going to see a change in the way the pricing of medications, particularly as it relates to net pricing. So that can mean changes in rebate structure. So rebates may go away. I think that's something that does need to happen. It artificially, I'll give you a perfect example. And if somebody wants to argue me, I would love somebody to drop a comment, send me a note, tell me where I'm wrong here. The problem with rebates is, one, it's not transparent. It's hard for people to understand. I buy this drug. First of all, is there a rebate and how much? And depending on the pharmacy benefit manager you have, the rebate can differ because it depends on how many middlemen are between your PBM and the source of the rebate, right? And all those middlemen that are involved are taking a cut of that rebate, or they're taking a cut of the spread. There's a disconnect between what does this actually cost and what do I actually pay. So in my opinion, any sort of system that conflates or confuses the price of something, there's a reason people want that in place, because when there's an asymmetry of information, people have an advantage and they can profit from it. It needs to go away. That needs to go away. The second thing is going to be the ownership of PBMs, and there needs to be a system to make global access to medications much simpler. Imagine you need to get a medication filled. You can go onto a portal on your phone or go to an app on your phone, and your doctor can prescribe it to whether it's a pharmacy benefit manager or whether it's a vendor that's tied into your health plan. You order the drug and it's going to be drop shipped from wherever the lowest net cost price is. So if I'm going to go fill my Ozempic at Walgreens down the street and it's $1,050, but I have an option to source it from somewhere and it's $100, you as an employer can design your plan. We do this today already with many medications, not all because they're not all available this way. But you can design it to where if you pick the right pharmacy, it's the lowest cost, same exact drug, but I choose to have it drop shipped to my door, it's free. That's how you're gonna drive the incentive or the disincentive. Yeah, sure, go buy it at Walgreens and pay $1,000, but guess what? You have a much higher copay to access it there, but you can get it for free if you choose to get it from this pharmacy or this source, because the plan is able to save, the member's able to save, everybody wins in that scenario. And that's available today. We're doing that with many of our clients, but there's limitations to how far you can take it. The government needs to remove those barriers to completely open this up. And ultimately, I think that's the direction that we're going. So the end result of this is I think you're going to see massive change over the next 6 to 18 months. And over the course of the Trump administration, you're going to see more of these changes enacted that are going to be good. Well, let me back up. It's going to be bad for some people, primarily the legacy players that profit as our costs continue to rise, that are constantly looking for ways to obscure their payment mechanisms. How they get paid? That needs to be fixed, and that is likely going to be fixed for the betterment of society, betterment of your plan performance, and betterment for your employees. We shouldn't be paying more than we should. We've got to get rid of this veil of secrecy that's over what we're buying and what we're paying. And I think that's ultimately what this executive order was intended to signal. And I ultimately believe that's the direction that we're headed, which is a good thing for our society. Ultimately, this is all good things for our society. And we need to be able to continue further implementing these things into our plan. So many of these things are available today, not through legacy players. So if you're working with one of the big 3 PBMs, even basic things like biosimilar medications, if it's not through a joint venture that they've got that they can profit from, it's not available. Or it's not preferred. International sourcing, being able to get patient assistance. There's other programs that we implement into these plans that help reduce the cost for employers, and it helps your employees out by providing these medications for free, which is a kind of a no-brainer, right? Like, why should we not be taking these basic steps while we can take them and then working at these solutions while the government's taking bigger actions with regulatory reform, which I'm excited to see this. It's much needed. And there's disruption that's needed to fix the issues that we face as a society, as employers, buying healthcare for our employees. Because at the end of the day, right, your employee pays a premium. It's a fraction of the true cost of insurance. When they go to get medications and they go to have expensive procedures, yes, they're paying a deductible. But if you're a plan sponsor, you're a CFO or an HR person, you know this. Somebody has $1 million claim, right? The life-saving care that we want them to get, or they've got a preemie baby, or they've got cancer, or they've got something else going on. The employee pays a very small portion of that. Maybe it's a few $1,000s of a deductible, $5,000 out of pocket. But in the face of $100,000, a $500,000, $1 million claim, they're paying a very small percentage of it. It's the employer that's picking up the tab. And so we need to figure out a way to design these plans in a cost-effective way that gives employees, gives the membership what they need, when they need it, at the right price. Everybody benefits from that sort of ecosystem. And that's my encouragement to everybody. Change is coming. It's going to be good. It's not going to look like we think it's going to look as it sits today, but it's moving in the right direction. That's my takeaway for today. I hope it helps. Take care.